So, have you ever really thought about how the whole idea of manhood gets passed down from one generation to the next? And maybe more importantly, what happens when that chain of knowledge breaks? Today, we're going to dig into the architecture of manhood and look at the fault lines that are starting to show up in a lot of families.
Wow. Okay, this single sentence from our source material, it is a bombshell, right? It's a question that just cuts right through everything. It challenges authority, family history, the whole structure. It's so pointed and personal, and it gets right to the very heart of what we're talking about.
And that really is the central question, isn't it? This implies that some expected order has been completely disrupted. There's a breakdown in the chain of command. So to really get the tension in that quote, we've got to first take a look at the original blueprint for how this was all supposed to work. So let's start there with the traditional structure. Our source calls this a father's blueprint. I want you to think of this as the foundation, the architectural plans that generations of expectations have been built on. Now, the cornerstone of this blueprint is what's called paternal inheritance. And just to be clear, we're not talking about inheriting money or a house here. This is about inheriting an identity, a sense of responsibility, a whole worldview. It's like the unwritten instruction manual for being a man, passed directly from father to son.
You could almost break this inheritance down into a kind of curriculum. And the lessons, they go way beyond just, practical skills like how to fix a car. They're about a code of conduct, how you're supposed to carry yourself. They're about financial responsibility, how you provide for a family. And, this is a big one, they're about understanding your specific, defined role within that family structure. This was the whole framework.
But what happens when that framework starts to crack and crumble? This is where we hit a really critical idea from our source, the instructional void. And this is exactly where the conflict from that opening quote really catches fire.
So for a ton of different reasons, the economy changes, social norms evolve, family structures look different, that old school transfer of knowledge just isn't a guarantee anymore. The lines on the blueprint are getting blurry, and in some cases, they're just gone. And a lot of the time when the blueprint fades, it's because the original architect, the father figure in this traditional model, is either physically or just emotionally absent from that teaching role. The main instructor just isn't showing up to class anymore.
And here's the most important part. Nature hates a vacuum, and so does a family. When this instruction doesn't happen, it doesn't just disappear into thin air. It leaves a void, a huge gap in knowledge and expectations that is just begging to be filled by someone or something.
Now, a void like that, it doesn't just sit there quietly. It creates a ripple effect. It fundamentally changes the dynamics and the responsibilities for the entire family, often in ways that nobody ever saw coming.
Which leads to a really critical question, right? If the designated teacher is gone, who ends up taking over the lesson plan? Because that responsibility, that need for someone to give guidance, it has to fall somewhere.
And this is the major shift that our source material points to. The role of the instructor is being taken on more and more by mothers and sisters. They see the gap left by an absent father, and they step in to try and teach the lessons that were, traditionally, a man's domain.
And look at that, we're right back where we started, full circle. The tension in that opening quote, if your father didn't teach your brothers, why are you trying to teach me? It comes directly from this massive role shift. It's the friction you get when a new, non-traditional teacher tries to use a very, very old blueprint.
So all of this leaves us at a really fascinating and pretty complex crossroads. The old architecture is crumbling, and we have new builders stepping onto the site. The huge question now is, what do we build in its place? It's so important to get that this isn't just some small tweak. The breakdown of this paternal inheritance, especially when it comes to ideas about manhood and money, is fundamentally reshaping how families actually work and relate to one another. And that's the question we want to leave you with. In a world without a clear inherited model, who actually gets to design the next generation's architecture of manhood? Is it a group project? Is it something everyone figures out on their own? The plans are unwritten, and the drafting table is waiting.